Welcome to the channel, 1275 MG Midget, the birth of a race car, chronicling my journey from, I won't say scrap car, but kind of car in need of restoration through to the MG Owners Club 2022 Speed Series. In this episode we're going to have a look at the front footboard repair and also the cross member repair. Next up is the floor. I can do that now because I've got all my edges complete. I've got my front edge here, I've got my back edge determined by the bulkhead repair. I've got the cut down the side. I'll need to cut the floor to match that. I've drilled all the spot welds, so the floor is ready to go onto the bottom. And after I've done the floor, I'll be able to reinstate this cross member with a repair there. First step is to dry fit the floor. I'm happy with the fit. Also I've put on the outer sill just to check the alignment to the inner body. And so next step is going to be to do some marking from the inside where I've got my cut edge along here, and then I'm going to use some hand shears just to cut along that line, get it as accurately as possible. And what that should mean is that then I've got a nice butt weld that I've got to do all the way along here to fit the floor. And then what we'll do is do some plug welding along the edges to mount that in. So the cut's done. First fit up, it's okay, but it's not brilliant. Left a little bit too much material here, so you can see I've marked up with a white pen where there's a bit of an overlap, so I need to get the power file and linish that back to get a better fit. The front's okay, not a problem there. So we've got a small gap there, but that'll be welded up. Just a little bit to trim off. So now begin a process of on off until we can get a good fit, and I'm happy with the floor position. The floor's been on and off about 4 or 5 times now, slowly dressing back, and I've got a nice steady gap all the way along the floor now, so I'm happy with that. The fit seems okay. I've dry fitted the floor, dry fitted the inner sill. So next step is to take it back off again, linish up all the surfaces. I'm going to prep it all up, get it ready, and then we can start to tack the floor on. All clamped up and ready to weld. So a couple of points here. These little weld clamps are absolutely brilliant. They'll keep the floor flush while I tack it before doing the seam weld. So they're pretty much essential if you're doing it this way. And the other thing to note here is that I've fitted the spring hanger bracket. This is a new bracket and bolts, and what I've done is just fitted that so I know that when the floor is welded nothing's going to move in that area, and that's going to be able to be re-established really easily. So other than that, clamped it together, so I'm going to weld where I clamp just to tack it together, and then once it's all tacked on we'll be able to remove the clamps and then go for the final weld. Note from the inside, I'm going to have to do the plug welds back through the chassis rails, so I'm going to have to get in the car to do that. Halfway with the welding, you can see all of the tacks along the floor and the plug welds up here. So I'm now going to turn the body over a little bit so I can get inside and weld along the chassis rails and the rear bulkhead. So I've got the car moved over now, so now you can see access to all of the plug welds that I need to do around the cross member repair and down the chassis rail. So I'm going to get those done now, and then put it back up on its side so I can finish off the seam weld along the floor there. So all the internal plug welds are done now. Really pleased with those, they've come out okay. Good to see good penetration on the underneath of the floor, which is good. So the only thing left to do on the floor now is to run along the seam for the bottom edge. Passenger side floor is now on. Really pleased how it's gone together. All the welds are done. All the floor is seam welded and then linished back. Spot welds are on. It's all been plug welded inside and linished back. So that's the passenger side floor on. First step has been to prepare the panel. So I've drilled out all of the plug weld holes on the inner edge, top and bottom. I've left the outer done, as we'll drill holes in the inner sill to be able to plug weld through to that. And what we're going to do is offer that up. And the good news is this goes pretty much straight in, so fitting down on the front and then into the side. So what I'm going to do is clamp that up and then begin the plug welding. Before I do that though, what I'm going to do is put some seam sealer into the areas where I'm not going to be able to get to once the panel's in, to make sure we've got some level of corrosion protection once we box the panel in. So all clamped up, ready to tack into place. So the challenge here is going to be getting the welding stick in there and getting good visibility of the hole. So that's going to be the challenge for this particular job. The panel itself is relatively straightforward and should just fit into place nicely. So let's tack it into place. For those that might have an interest, the welder I'm using is happens to be a Clark weld machine, but there's lots of different brands on the market. This one goes from 30 to 135 amps. I've got it on the absolute minimum setting, so minimum and 1, and in terms of wire feed I'm typically anywhere between 5 and 6.5, depending on the weld. In terms of wire, I started off on the other side with 0.6 wire and now I'm actually running 0.8 wire. I'm finding the 0.6 was easier to weld but harder to put more on, whereas the 0.8 it puts more on quicker and therefore needs a little bit more thought and control. But overall pleased with how it's welding, no real concerns with that. I've put the first few tack welds on just to hold it into place. You might be able to see over there. This is a good time to point out that seam sealer and weld through primer do have flammable qualities, something I've just learned. So yeah, be careful, make sure you've got water or a fire extinguisher handy when you do this. So now, while winning no prizes for prettiness, the front toe board is in and is certainly well secure onto the front bulkhead and the floor and the side. So that will help to give lots of strength. Onto the cross member repair. I've already got some in there. There wasn't a need to take it all back. So my plan of attack here is going to be to cut it back so that there's probably about an inch. It's an inch too long. Then slowly cut back to get a good fit onto the cross member that's already there, so that I can kind of butt weld it all the way around. The plan is to align it so that it just fits nicely up against the edge, and then before final fitment I'll get the inner sill to make sure that it's in alignment with the hole for the jack. So here's the cross member repair panel, cut to size now. I've linished that up. I've put some holes in it for plug welding, finished at the bottom. So now when that goes in here, that fits quite nicely. So next job is to clamp it all up, check alignment, and then get ready to weld. So final check before welding. Really crude, but I'm simply using a steel rule to check the straightness, to make sure it's in the right place. And I've offered up the inner sill previously as well, just to make sure the jacking hole's right. But worst case, I can always elongate or trim the hole for the jacking hole, so I'm not too bothered about that one. So, but I'm happy that's straight. So let's weld it in. Front cross member repair is now welded in and linished back. So final step here is going to be to put some seam sealer on to the joints and then spray with red oxide just to protect it while we move on to the next job. I'm going to be doing the same with the front footboard as well, and then that's this part of the repair all finished.